The war room of the Kethran Imperial Dreadnought Sovereign's Fist hummed with the confidence of 1,000 victories. Admiral Vexthor stood before the holographic display, his 3 eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he studied the tactical readout. The human fleet hung in space before them, like insects caught in amber. Their pathetically small vessels arranged in what the Kethrans assumed was some primitive defensive formation. "They're not retreating," observed Commander Tilrak, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The humans, they're holding position." Vexthor's mandibles clicked in what passed for Kethran laughter. "Of course they're not retreating. They don't yet understand what they face. They don't know that our armor plating is 3 meters thick, forged from compressed dark matter alloys that have withstood plasma bombardment, fusion torpedoes, and quantum disruptors. They don't know that in 700 years of galactic warfare, only twice has a Kethran dreadnought's hull been breached." The holographic display showed the human fleet in stark detail. 37 vessels, the largest barely a third the size of the Sovereign's Fist. They were angular things, all sharp edges and exposed infrastructure. Nothing like the elegant curves of Kethran engineering. To Vexthor's experienced eye, they looked fragile, breakable. "Shall I give the order to advance, Admiral?" Tilrak asked. "Not yet." Vexthor's central eye narrowed. "Let them make the first move. Let them waste their ammunition against our hulls. When they realize the futility of their resistance, their morale will shatter. That's when we strike." What Admiral Vexthor didn't know, what none of the Kethran commanders could have known, was that aboard the human flagship UNSC Perseverance, Captain Sarah Chen was having a very different conversation. Distance to target, Chen's voice was steady, but her exec could see the tension in her shoulders. 80,000 kilometers and holding, Captain," replied Lieutenant Marcus Webb from Tactical. "The Kethran fleet is maintaining formation. 23 dreadnoughts, 47 destroyers, over 100 support craft." Chen stared at the viewscreen, watching the massive Kethran vessels hang in the void like sleeping giants. She'd read the intelligence reports. She knew what those ships were made of. Dark matter alloys, 3 meters of nearly impenetrable armor. The kind of defense that had made the Kethran Empire the dominant military power in 3 sectors of the galaxy. Weapons status: "All railgun batteries charged and ready, ma'am." Projectiles loaded. Tungsten carbide penetrators, depleted uranium cores magnetically accelerated to 0.03 C. Chen allowed herself the ghost of a smile. 0.03 C, 3% of light speed. "Yes, ma'am. The eggheads at R&D assure us that's the optimal velocity. Any faster and the projectiles destabilize. Any slower, and we don't get the penetration we need. And has anyone ever tested these weapons against dark matter alloys before?" Webb hesitated. "No, ma'am. This will be the first time." The bridge fell silent. Everyone aboard knew what that meant. They were about to bet everything, their lives, their ships, the fate of humanity's colonies, on untested weapons facing an enemy that had never been defeated in conventional warfare. Chen straightened in her command chair. "Then I suppose we're about to make history one way or another. All ships, prepare to execute firing solution Delta 7 on my mark. Would you do it? Would you order your fleet to attack an enemy that outnumbered you, outgunned you, and had armor plating that had never been breached? Would you bet everything on a theory, on mathematics and engineering, on the desperate innovation that comes from being humanity's last line of defense?" Across the void, Admiral Vexthor watched the human fleet begin to move. The smaller vessels were breaking formation, spreading out in what looked like a standard dispersal pattern. Predictable, textbook, the kind of maneuver that might work against plasma weapons, create multiple targets, force the enemy to split their fire. "They're moving into firing positions," Tilrak reported. "Energy signatures are strange, not plasma buildup, not fusion ignition. I'm reading massive electromagnetic spikes across all 37 vessels." Electromagnetic. Vexthor's confusion was evident. "What are they planning to do? Disrupt our communications?" "Pathetic. Admiral, I recommend we raise shields to maximum and—" "No." Vexthor's voice was firm. "Let them see how useless their weapons are against Kethran engineering. Let them fire first. Let them understand the mistake they've made coming here. It was a decision that would haunt the Kethran Empire for generations." Aboard the Perseverance, Captain Chen watched the countdown timer tick towards 0. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. but she could feel the tension radiating from every station. This was it. Humanity's gambit, their secret weapon. The technology they'd developed in isolation, while the rest of the galaxy perfected energy weapons and particle beams. "All ships report ready, Captain," Webb announced. "Firing solutions locked." Targeting the lead dreadnought's command section, Chen took a deep breath. Fire! The word was barely a whisper, but it was enough. Across the human fleet, 37 railgun batteries spoke in unison. There was no visible beam. No colorful lance of energy streaking across space. What the Kethrans saw instead was something far more terrifying. Absolutely nothing. For 0.7 seconds, there was silence. Then the Sovereign's fist shuddered. Admiral Vexthor stumbled as the deck lurched beneath his feet. Alarms began screaming across every console. What was... The second impact cut off his words. The entire dreadnought rang like a struck bell. "Hull breach," Tilrak shouted over the cacophony of warnings. "Multiple hull breaches. Sections 12 through 17, decks 45 through 92. We're..." Her voice died as she stared at the damage readout in disbelief. "Admiral, they punched straight through our armor." Clean through. The projectiles went through 3 meters of dark matter alloy like it wasn't even there. Vexthor grabbed the edge of the tactical display to steady himself as a third impact shook the ship. On the hologram, he could see the damage spreading across his flagship like a disease. Red indicators blooming where his impenetrable armor had been. Penetrated. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" A fourth impact, a fifth. The humans were firing in coordinated volleys, and every shot was hitting home. "Admiral, the Eternal Glory is reporting catastrophic damage," an officer screamed from across the bridge. "The Dominion's Pride has lost primary power. The Vengeance Absolute is..." The Vengeance Absolute exploded. It wasn't a dramatic fireball like in the holovids. It was worse. The dreadnought simply came apart, its spine severed by a railgun round that had traveled through the ship's reactor core at 3% of light speed. The fusion containment failed, and for a brief moment a new star was born in the void. Then it was gone, and with it 12,000 Kethran warriors. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Vexthor roared, his composure finally shattering. "Return fire! All weapons, return fire now!" But the human fleet was already moving, their smaller, more agile vessels dancing between the Kethran volleys. Plasma beams that would have vaporized them missed by kilometers. Fusion torpedoes exploded harmlessly against debris fields. And still, the railgun rounds kept coming. Captain Chen watched the battle unfold with the detached calm of someone who had already made peace with whatever outcome awaited her. The tactical display showed the Kethran fleet in disarray, their tight formation breaking apart as individual ships tried desperately to evade the kinetic bombardment. "Direct hit on the lead dreadnought's bridge section," Webb reported, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "Their command structure is fragmenting. 3 more dreadnoughts showing critical damage. The enemy is attempting to withdraw. Don't let them." Chen's voice was ice. "All ships pursuit formation. Target their engines. I want every Kethran vessel either disabled or destroyed before they reach the hyperspace threshold." "Captain," Webb hesitated, "some of them are trying to surrender. We're receiving communication requests." Chen thought about the colony worlds the Kethrans had burned. She thought about New Terre, where orbital bombardment had killed 2 million people in a single afternoon. She thought about her brother, who had died defending the evacuation shuttles while Kethran plasma turned the sky to fire. "Tell them we'll accept their surrender after their fleet is disabled," she said quietly. "Not before." They wanted to see what humanity was capable of. "Let's show them. Do you understand the cold mathematics of survival? When you're outmatched, outnumbered, when your enemy has shown you no mercy and expects none in return, what choice do you have but to hit them with everything you've got? What choice do you have but to show them that humanity doesn't play by the same rules, doesn't use the same weapons, doesn't break the same way they expect?" The railguns fired again. Aboard the crippled Sovereign's fist, Admiral Vexthor watched his fleet die. The Eternal Glory had lost all propulsion and was tumbling through space, atmosphere venting from a dozen hull breaches. The Dominion's Pride had managed to return fire once, before a railgun round severed its weapon arrays. The Vengeance Absolute was simply gone. "They're not using energy weapons," Tilrak said, her voice hollow with shock. "They're using kinetic projectiles." Solid matter accelerated to relativistic speeds. The impact energy is... She pulled up calculations on her console. Admiral, a single projectile carries kinetic energy equivalent to a fusion warhead. But there's no radiation, no heat bloom warning, no energy signature we can track. By the time our sensors detect the projectile, it's already... Another impact. The bridge lights flickered. Already hit us, she finished weakly. Vexthor stared at the holographic display, watching the human fleet maneuver with terrifying precision. They were smaller, yes. Weaker in armor, yes. But they were faster, more agile, and they had weapons that turned the Kethran Empire's greatest strength into meaningless dead weight. 3 meters of dark matter alloy. 700 years of military dominance. And the humans had made it all irrelevant in less than 10 minutes. Open a channel to the human flagship, Vexthor said quietly. All frequencies. Admiral, the Council will consider this. The Council isn't here. Vexthor's voice was sharp. The Council didn't watch a dreadnought explode. The Council isn't sitting in a crippled ship, while an enemy we underestimated picks apart our fleet like scavengers. Open the channel. A moment later, the view screen flickered to life. The human commander appeared, a female by their species' dimorphic standards, with dark hair and eyes that held no warmth, no mercy, only cold calculation. This is Admiral Vexthor of the Kethran Imperial Fleet, he began, choosing his words carefully. I am authorized to discuss terms. The human, the readout identified her as Captain Chen, studied him for a long moment. Terms, she repeated, as if tasting the word. You came to our system. You demanded our surrender. You threatened to do to our colonies what you did to New Terre. And now you want to discuss terms? Vexthor's mandibles twitched. Your weapons are effective, unexpectedly so. But surely we can reach an understanding that doesn't require further loss of life. You're right, Chen said, and for a moment Vexthor felt a surge of hope. We can reach an understanding. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. Power down your weapons. Disable your engines. Order your remaining ships to do the same. You have 3 minutes. Any vessel that fails to comply will be destroyed. Any vessel that attempts to flee will be destroyed. After your fleet is secured, we'll discuss prisoner arrangements and repatriation protocols. Her expression didn't change. Those are the terms. You have 3 minutes. The channel cut off. Vexthor stood in the sudden silence of his ruined bridge, surrounded by wounded officers and sparking consoles and the groaning of stressed metal. He had commanded fleets for 40 cycles. He had conquered 12 systems. He had brought glory to the Kethran Empire and terror to its enemies. And in 10 minutes, a human fleet 1/3 the size of his own had reduced him to this. Broadcast the order, he said finally. All ships are to power down weapons and disable engines. We surrender. The human fleet watched in silence as the Kethran vessels went dark one by one. Aboard the Perseverance, Captain Chen allowed herself to slump back in her chair, the adrenaline that had kept her sharp finally beginning to fade. Casualties? She asked quietly. 3 ships reported minor damage from debris, Webb replied. No casualties. They never hit us, ma'am. Not once, Chen closed her eyes. No casualties. Against a fleet that should have been able to vaporize them in seconds, they had suffered no casualties. The railguns worked, she said. More to herself than anyone else. Like a charm. Ma'am, Webb's voice held a note of wonder. The penetrators went through their armor like it was tissue paper. The kinetic energy transfer alone was enough to cause catastrophic internal damage, even before the secondary fragmentation. It was beautiful, ma'am. In a terrible way. Chen understood what he meant. There was nothing beautiful about war, about death, about the necessity of violence. But there was something almost poetic about the physics of it. The Kethrans had built their empire on armor, on defense, on the idea that their ships were fortress vessels that could withstand anything the galaxy threw at them. And humanity had looked at those fortresses and decided not to fight them with energy, with heat, with plasma or fusion. Humanity had remembered the oldest law of physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. And if you couldn't match the enemy's mass, you simply increased the acceleration until the equation balanced out in your favor. Begin prisoner protocols, Chen ordered, her voice regaining its command edge. And send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them the railgun project exceeded all expectations. Tell them the Kethran invasion fleet has been neutralized. She paused, then added, Tell them we won. The message took 4 hours to reach Earth at light speed. When it did, there was celebration in the streets of every human colony. The Kethran Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, had been stopped. The threat that had loomed over humanity like an executioner's blade had been turned aside. But in the halls of power, in the strategy rooms and planning centers, the military minds of humanity were already looking ahead, because now the galaxy would know. Now every species, every empire, every power would know that humanity had weapons that could defeat the undefeatable. They would know that the primitive species from the edge of the galaxy wasn't so primitive after all, and some would come seeking alliance. But others would come seeking to destroy this new threat before it grew too strong. 3 weeks after the battle, Captain Chen found herself aboard a transport ship heading for Earth. She'd been summoned to Fleet Command for debriefing, for medal ceremonies, for the 1,000 bureaucratic necessities that followed a pivotal military victory. She sat in the observation deck, watching the stars slide past, and thought about Admiral Vexthor's face on that view screen. The shock, the disbelief, the sudden crushing realization that everything he thought he knew about warfare had become obsolete in the span of 10 minutes. Captain Chen? She turned to find a young ensign standing at attention. "At ease, what is it?" "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, what you did out there, it was incredible. The way you stood up to them, the way you didn't back down even though they had us outnumbered and outgunned." The ensign struggled for words. "You showed them what humans are made of," Chen smiled sadly. "I showed them what desperation is made of, ensign. What happens when you back someone into a corner and they have no choice but to fight their way out?" She gestured to the viewport, to the infinite stars beyond. "We won this battle, but the war's just beginning. And next time our enemies won't underestimate us. You think there'll be a next time? I know there will be, because now we've shown the galaxy that we're dangerous. And dangerous things don't get left alone. They get eliminated or absorbed. We're going to have to fight for every inch of space we claim, for every world we colonize, for the right to exist as an independent species." The ensign nodded slowly. "Then I guess it's a good thing we have railguns." "It's a good thing we have more than that," Chen corrected. "It's a good thing we have people who refuse to accept defeat, who look at impossible odds and figure out how to beat them anyway, who take the oldest, simplest concept in physics, throw a rock really, really hard, and turn it into a weapon that can crack open a dreadnought." She stood, straightening her uniform. "The railguns are just tools, ensign. What won that battle was the human capacity for lateral thinking, for refusing to fight the enemy on their terms, for finding the one angle they never prepared for and exploiting it until their defenses meant nothing. What would you call that, ma'am, if you had to give it a name?" Chen considered the question as she moved toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back at the young officer. "Adaptability," she said. "Or stubbornness. Or maybe just the sheer refusal to go gentle into that good night." She smiled. "Take your pick. They all mean the same thing in the end. Humanity doesn't give up. Not when we're outmatched. Not when the enemy has better armor. Not even when the smart play is to surrender and hope for mercy." "We punch through," the ensign said quietly. "We punch through," Chen agreed. "No matter how thick the armor. No matter how impossible it seems. We find a way." 6 months later, the Kethran Empire formally requested a peace treaty. The terms were favorable to humanity. Territorial concessions, trade agreements, a non-aggression pact that would hold for at least a generation. But more importantly, word had spread throughout the galaxy. The species that had seemed primitive, that had been dismissed as backward and weak, had defeated the Kethran Imperial fleet with a single battle. Ambassadors from a dozen systems came calling, some offering friendship, some offering alliance, all of them carefully respectful, in a way they had never been before, because the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson that day. In the void above humanity's colony world of Arcturus 7th, they had learned that armor is only as good as the weapons designed to defeat it, that a defense which cannot be breached is a challenge, not a certainty, that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective ones. They had learned that when you threaten humanity, when you come to their worlds with fleets and ultimatums, and the arrogant certainty that your superior technology makes you invincible, sometimes humanity just throws a rock at you, a very, very fast rock, fast enough to punch through 3 meters of dark matter alloy like it was paper. Fast enough to turn your impregnable fortress ships into debris. Fast enough to remind the galaxy that humans had been killing each other with kinetic weapons since before they learned to make fire. And in all that time, they had gotten very, very good at it. The Kethrans armor-plated their ships. They built them thick and strong and declared them unbeatable. And humanity's railguns punched right through, because that's what humans do. They see your greatest strength, and they figure out how to make it irrelevant. They take the rules of engagement you've written, and they rewrite them. They look at your fortress and they don't try to siege it. They just accelerate a tungsten carbide penetrator to 3% of light speed and let physics do the rest. So here's the question I'll leave you with. What would you have done in Captain Chen's position? Would you have bet everything on untested weapons? Would you have stared down an enemy that had never been beaten and given the order to fire? Would you have had the courage to reject the conventional wisdom of energy weapons and instead embrace the brutal simplicity of kinetic bombardment? The answer matters because somewhere out there in the universe there might be another species facing the same choice. Another underestimated people staring at an enemy they can't defeat with conventional means. Another desperate gambit that needs to be taken. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember what humanity did at Arcturus 7. They'll remember that sometimes the best way through impenetrable armor is to hit it hard enough that impenetrable becomes just another word for hasn't met the right weapon yet. If you enjoyed this story, if you want to hear more tales of humanity, proving that we're tougher, smarter and more adaptable than anyone expects, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below and let me know. What other human advantages do you think would surprise an alien empire? What would you want to see humanity do next in our galaxy-spanning adventures? Because we're just getting started. The railguns were just the opening shot, and humanity, we're always ready to fire again. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.